Hey, it's Dave Brown here, host of Now with Dave Brown on AMI. Check out this latest highlight from the show. An ongoing conversation we have on this show is about design and inclusion. So oftentimes we're talking about city spaces and buildings and civil engineering, interior design. But what about the great outdoors? How can we make that more accessible to Canadians with disabilities? Well, an upcoming conference is going to be addressing just that question. The conference comes together and is organized by Accessible Parks Canada, a research project led by the KITE Research Institute in Toronto. And Tilak Dutta is a scientist with KITE and joins us now to tell you more. Hello, Tilak. Thank you so much for making time to be with us today. We're grateful.
Hi, Dave. Well, I'm really excited to be here and to be able to share some of this work that we've been doing and to invite your audience to be part of this conference if they want to be.
So I want to get to the conference in a moment, but first and foremost, your interest in this topic came from a personal experience. I wonder if you can describe that for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's so I have a son. He just turned 5, and he happens to use a wheelchair. And we've had a number of experiences where we've planned to go out for a day trip somewhere. We've looked up online, that there are supposed to be these accessible facilities there. In this particular case, we were going out to the beaches in Toronto. For those who know the area, it's for those who know, it's quite a long sandy area that you have to traverse. There's a boardwalk, there's parking. You get out of your vehicle and you there's a boardwalk that kind of runs the length of the beach, but to get to the water, you have to go across quite a bit of sand. And there was, I read that there was a beach mat available there. And so I thought, okay, let's see if we can pack up the family and make this trip and spend the afternoon at the beach and by the water. But when we got there, we were not able to find where that beach mat was. And there were no signs that I could find. We wandered around the boardwalk for a while to try to figure out where this beach mat might be. I checked on my phone to see if I could figure out more details from the website, the city website. None of that helped. In the end, we ended up kind of dragging our son's wheelchair across the sand. We were able to do it okay. He's still pretty little, so it's reasonable for my wife and I to push him, and our other son's able to walk, so it's not too big a deal. But I think it just highlights the type of challenges that a lot of people face when, even if there are accessible features available, it's not always clear where they are.
Mm-hmm.
When I went home and I called the city, I don't think I'm exaggerating. If my memory serves, it was 7 phone calls before someone said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that this happened. This person said you need to call this person, and this person said you need to call this person, and that person said you need to email this person," and no one knew where this thing was. I'm sure it's not new to any of your listeners. I'm sure your audience is aware of this problem, but this is the type of thing, even if we think about someone packing up to go to a national park,
mm-hmm.
It's a big undertaking, and you're putting a lot of trust in the park, in all of the facilities that you're going to need to access when you get there. And even if it's written on the website, the person you talk to when you get there has to know where that accessible washroom is, for instance, and it has to be unlocked. So many people I talk to have these kind of challenges, and it's a big issue. And so we're trying, through this conference and through this project, we're trying to capture as many of these stories as we can to highlight what are all the barriers that people have run up against, and how do we start fixing these problems.
Yeah, the reason why I wanted to start with that personal story is because it's a microcosm of the macro issues that are facing people with disabilities all across the country. That's one beach in Toronto, but we hear stories about like the beach mats in Kincardine, for example, going into one of the Great Lakes, right? But the thing is that accessibility and inclusion means more than just a feature. You have to connect these things together. And as you point out, people need the information, right? You can't just have something. People need to know how to get to it. So let's talk about this conference. How did it come together? Who are some of the voices that you're bringing together to enrich this conversation?
Yeah, so there's 3 main groups that we're trying to bring into this. One, the most important, I would argue, are the people with lived experience with disabilities, or people that provide care for people with disabilities, families like ours who have children with disabilities. We want to hear, first and foremost from that group. and we want them to share not only the barriers that they've experienced, but also, other areas in the world, other jurisdictions around the world are quite a bit further ahead than Canada is, unfortunately. I'm happy to be a Canadian, but I can say for accessibility, the US and other countries around the world in Europe have done a lot more. And so people who visited some of these jurisdictions, we want to hear what are the types of things that they've come across that we should emulate here, right? What are the types of things that people have solved some of these problems? How have they done it? Where you found a good experience? Tell us about those experiences. So that's one group that we want there. The second group is people who run these parks. So Parks Canada, for instance, we're expanding beyond. This is a federally funded project, and they are personally. That group is more interested in funding work for our national parks, but we're just as interested in provincial parks. So people that are part of, the people that design, run, maintain these spaces, we want them there to tell us, what are the challenges to some of the things that we know everyone wants to work together to make these spaces better. What are the limitations that they feel that may be in place that makes it difficult to make that accessible? And then the third group that we want to hear from are companies that have developed either products or services that make these spaces more accessible. So for instance, we talked about beach mats, the companies that make beach mats and beach chairs, and there are a whole host of products, many of them created by families who got frustrated, like going outdoors, like going to parks, but couldn't have the experiences they wanted. And they said, well, I guess I have to develop something. I have to build something and they to make this a better experience. And they, one example is, I'm going to forget the name of the company, but they make a wheelchair that allows the off-road use, essentially. And this is something that's a company out in BC that developed this, but unfortunately they tell us that actually they don't sell a lot of their products within Canada. They sell them more in other countries around the world. And so that was a bit surprising and a bit sad for me to hear that, a product that was Canadian designed and built is not accessible to most Canadians that want to use them. So those are the three groups that we want to bring in to talk about this, to connect, and try to find a way forward.
You mentioned you're looking for some feedback from people with lived experience. Is it too late for people to try to submit that or get that in? How can they go about participating in that way?
Yeah, so we've now closed our speaker application process, but the actual conference runs from August 23rd to the 25th, and it's free, and we want everyone to attend, and there will be many opportunities to provide feedback on anything you want to provide feedback on through that conference. And so yes, we want people to. Sorry, I see your tag at the bottom there says runs July 23rd to 25th, but it's actually August 23rd to 25th. So we would love people to attend, and there will be many opportunities where we're going to ask people to provide that feedback. We're running a survey concurrently which is part of our research project, to gather some of the same experience. And so that'll be something that will be open to people to be able to do during that time as well. So lots of opportunities to get feedback. That's essentially the main goal of this, is to get feedback and connect people together.
Where should people go if they do want to register and start sending some of that feedback in?
Yeah, so the best website, I'm just going to pull it up so I don't get it wrong. It's parksaccessibilityconference.ca. parksaccessibilityconference.ca.
And I've got one more question before we get out of here, but I'm going to ask you for that website again before we go. But one more question before we get out of here, because my senior producer, Andrika Delanarol, is always doing incredible research. And she found that one of the goals is to create something called an accessibility matrix. And I love a word like accessibility matrix. That's my kind of term. So tell me about what kind of rubric you're trying to create there.
Yeah. So the idea is we're going to collect all this information and we need to organize it in some way. And so the idea we came up with is to organize it in this thing called a matrix, which is really just a table. So if you imagine a table where across the top we have all the different activities and tasks that you might need to participate in when you go to a park or might like to participate in. So that could be hiking, it could be going to the beach, it could be swimming, it could be camping, it could be using a bathroom, right? It could be changing, whatever that is. Those activities and tasks go across the top, and then down the side would be the different types of needs different people with disabilities might have. So someone, for instance, in a wheeled mobility device would have different needs than someone who might have a visual impairment. So what are the ways that we can, so the table, the idea is for the table to identify barriers for each need with each activity. And each box in the table is an opportunity to list those barriers and then potential solutions to those barriers. Does that make sense?
That makes all the sense in the world to me. That's very well described. So I think there's a lot here for people to sink their teeth into between now and August 23rd when the conference starts. So give us that web address one more time for folks to register and learn more.
Yeah, parksaccessibilityconference.ca.
It was so great chatting with you this morning. Best of luck with the conference, and thank you for the work that you and your colleagues are doing.
Thanks so much, Dave. It's great to be here.
Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI TV or download the podcasts wherever you listen. Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI TV or download the podcasts wherever you listen.